Here we go. So, welcome. This is our vendor reveal party. And so, the hotel did not let us use the cannons and confetti blasters and chalk guns and all of that, so we had to retool, and we kind of went with the red pill, blue pill theory. So, you take the red pill, you're a CISO, you never sleep again. You take the blue pill, you get a little more sleep, but
you have to believe whatever you're told.
There you go. So, I'm a CISO. I've been a CISO multiple times. I want to give you some perspectives on how I work with vendors and all of this. We've brought Alex.
Hello.
Alex is a vendor or a VAR and has some insight into what we should know of how that operates. And that's as I started putting this together and as then we started talking, it's a whole world that I'm unaware of, and yet I've been buying products for my entire career. So I want to share some of that with you. I want to make sure that you understand and use those in your life, and maybe there are some things, I know there are some things that you know that I don't know that I want to get into. So we're going to go through this. On the back side of each of your handouts there, we've basically just done a fill in the blank. At the very top, it says, what would you do blank? And then down the left, we've listed a bunch of scenarios that I think are probably the most frequent things that we find ourselves in as far as the situation goes. So the idea is, we're going to give you a few minutes. I want you to just write down the first word that comes to mind when you don't need to write a paragraph. I didn't give you enough room for that. But the idea is, I want you to lean out of your comfort zone. So if you've worked in the vendor space, try to fill in the CISO perspective. If you've worked in the CISO space, try to fill in the vendor perspective. If you've worked in both, fill out both. You can be an overachiever and fill them all out, or you can be selective and pick out the ones that are maybe the most interest to you. We can do this on a volunteer basis and just kind of shout out the ones that are most interesting to us, but we also have a red and a blue dice that we will actually just select some random participants, and we can make you speak when you don't want to speak, right?
And focus on the differences in motivation between the vendors and the CISOs. Like when are they aligned in their motivations, and when are they not aligned in their motivations?
That's what you'll find as a theme. There are alignments in there. When I think about this from my perspective, it's a who can I use as a partner? Who do I have to supplement my team with? Who can I rely on to help make a decision quickly, efficiently, fiduciarily, appropriate, and oftentimes having a partner to help me do that is what is a very useful tool. So let's just take 5 minutes. Let's jot down some thoughts, and then we're going to circle back to those. Yeah.
Just a quick question, like on the first one where it says product vendor's been compromised.
Yeah.
Under the vendor one, are you that vendor then? That's been compromised?
What's their perspective?
Sure.
What do they have to worry about?
Put yourself in that seat. Like what can I offer my CISO teams? What can I offer those as the product vendor? Like,
what do I got to worry about?
Or what do you think's going through their head?
What's top of mind for me?
Yeah.
I've had a breach.
So does that
now
make
what?
sense?
What am I
We're
going to do?
looking at like just where do you find yourself? So what do you do? Compliance. So think about it from when there is a compromise, like what compliance risks or issues do you think the CISO's going through? But then interestingly enough, if you're not a partner or a vendor, what do you think they're going through? Or how could they help you with a little bit more information or something like that? So dive in, see what you can figure out.
And some of the times the motivations between the partner and the vendor are different. So there's two different perspectives there.
Okay, fantastic. So you're down for the couple of days?
Yeah.
And what do you do?
But the partner could be another company, and you're bringing in this vendor
Like a VAR, for instance.
as part of a suite of
Yep. It's easier to procure through them, so that the technology went through them.
That solution, and then that's a
Yep.
vendor, and not a very good one.
Yeah.
To be quite frank.
Yeah.
You really want partners that work with you to protect you.
Well, in this particular instance, how we're
Like a consultant sale, like a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
That you want as a partner.
yes.
You know who the best person is to come in between them, not the vendor, the partner. the system, put the SE in there.
Yeah.
The SE knows both the product and the customer. He knows the team on the technical side, on the customer side, and he knows the product well enough that if it's got a hole, the SEs will actually tell you this is a limitation of the product. So
you know, you sell my job a lot better than I ever know, because that's what I do. I'm a trusted partner, and I'm a sales engineer.
Yep. You sit in the middle.
Yep. And
Come on, Bob.
I see it all,
You've
unfortunately.
Have the gems in there, man. Start.
No, we're going to answer them on the fly.
Oh, all right.
We've been doing this a while, yeah.
Hey, let's do it.
Flip your page over.
Yeah.
He throws it at me, that's right.
So, on that note, then, Andy is volunteered to start us off here. So, Andy, from a CISO perspective, what's the top topic there that you want to launch us with?
Well, when the product vendor has been compromised, I'm compromised.
Product vendor has been compromised.
Therefore, I'm compromised.
Okay.
Period. I assume that right off the bat.
Right.
And I begin the process of understanding what information I may have been compromised in that time based on what data classification I've done and what data I've shared with them. And if I've shared any data with them, then I call them and say, what are you doing and how can we work together to resolve this?
All right.
And from that point, once I have validated that, I call my attorney, not because I want to go after him,
Right.
but I need to protect both of us.
Perfect. So, from a vendor being compromised, that top line there, Andy's put out this perspective of he's looking at his blast radius. He's trying to understand how wide, how far do I have to look to address this situation. So that's his CISO perspective, right? He's now operational, and he's going to now think of what are these steps, what are these key partners that I need to reach out to contain this blast.
And at the same time, I'm instructing the engineering team to stop, contain it.
Sure. Yep.
We have to do all the standard incident response.
Bob, did you have a thought? Or
Yeah, just a fork in the road for the CISO is if he's in good standings with the C-level, and the rest of his peers and et cetera, it's he's going to be backed and supported. If he's not in a good path, he's going to push his problem more towards the partner vendor side.
yeah, perfect. Yep, absolutely. So thank you. So that's great. So we have addressed that blue or the red column, right? Like that's where that CISO is living. So from the vendor perspective,
Who has an idea what the vendor perspective would be in this situation?
what do you
For
think,
the
top one,
compromise.
we're thinking
You
of
have
now.
you have been breached. You're on the phone call with a CISO who might not be happy. What are you?
Educate, yeah. You have to educate them on what occurred, what are you doing at that point in time. But at the same time, I do work for a vendor, so I'll let you know. I've been on both sides of the house.
Yep.
So, which works out good for me because I always go from the customer side. But, the vendor also has to understand to what extent can they communicate about what's happening with the situation too,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yep.
there's a little bit about like, hey, how much can I tell you about what's going on? What do I know, right? So there's
Yep.
some stuff there, but ultimately, on the vendor side, I'm going to educate and inform and say, hey, here's what's going on. And if there are any types of things that they can do to remediate or compensate and control because a patch isn't there or something, they should be guiding you on, what you can do in that
So a
particular
pretty
area.
valuable resource if you've got an established relation or an established contact with this vendor or partner in this space, right? So on just the pure vendor play side, they might be pretty busy. Like you might not be their top client, or they might not have the most time for you or whatnot. You might be lower on the priority list of accepting the call, right?
From my perspective, it's a little bit different though. A vendor has like their sales team, their account manager.
Yep.
I think the account manager immediately would be on retention, making sure that the customer remains a customer.
Yep.
While the team's scrambling to fix the issue.
Yep.
And also assess the liability that they have, because there could be all sorts of contract.
Yeah, you hope that that's the case, right? Like you want to remain there. Yes, Bob.
Partner and vendor could be two separate people. The partner could have brought in the solution with a bunch of vendors, and this vendor is a single vendor. So you almost want the SE there, because the SE usually tells the truth no matter which side of the equation is on, where the partner and vendor may be trying to contain or stop any.
Well, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, so
Meet my sales engineer.
a lot of the times what ends up happening is there is a loss of trust here. And the sales team, the partner, is going to be doing everything that they can to reinstill trust in their product, in their process, in all the different aspects of why you bought that product to begin with. And some of the times that's going to be, oh no, we need to give a discount. We need to have a new, like when the renewal comes up, we don't want to lose this particular business. Or maybe the CISO is reaching out to the partner and going, well, do you still trust this vendor? Do you want us to bring in another vendor? Do you want to start auditioning other perspectives?
RCA. That's one thing. I want a root cause analysis. Please explain to me what happened, and then what are you doing to mitigate that in the future?
Exactly, and what I would say is where the relationship gets really strong is when the partner and or vendor comes to you first and says, I've got this problem.
Right.
If you discover it and they don't know about it, then that relationship is truly damaged because that trust is gone. But when they come to you, because everybody understands, it's not if, it's when.
Yep.
All right? So if we all understand and are accepting of that, then the next phase is how do you respond to the issue? If it's a vendor, they're not going to respond properly. They're going to respond as, it's not my problem, you didn't do this right. If it's a partner, you will recognize it during the time that this happens. You recognize partners when issues happen, period.
So
and
then
you recognize vendors when issues happen.
So we'll launch off of that, right? So you've got a good relationship with a good partner who is on your side and wants to help you there. Maybe you're lower on the priority list of that product vendor at that side. I can go to this firm for advice. I can go to the firm for maybe a more recent update than the Twitters is offering, and you're able to actually formulate a response that works, you have insight that works, and you're actually then working through a situation not completely blind. So
and never go out. Yeah, right. Understand the impact, but in the end, when you go to communicate, it's not. You don't say them. You say we had this issue.
Yeah.
We had this issue. Because now you're going to instill the trust in them with you, because you're not throwing them under the bus. It's no different from working with people in your organization. As soon as you throw them under the bus, they'll never work with you again.
Are you an I or a we person?
So
it's people and partners, it's just macros versus micros.
So we've recovered from this incident at this point that we are now reeling back from. Does anybody want to pick the next topic? Sandra, I'll pick on you. From a CISO perspective, what's the hot topic there that you're thinking of?
So sales team changes.
Oh, we're going to jump right to that one? Okay, I was hoping we'd build to that one, but that's fine. So the sales team changes. So why would a sales team change is what I'm going to hopefully address with this. But from the CISO perspective, I think we can share a collective frustration when that happens. I've heard throughout this, and I have these, it's the vendor that changes sales representative every single year. I just wait for the call. It's like, Joe's your new thing, Andy's your new thing, Mary's your, so it's like, if you get a call, right? So so that's frustrating. It hurts your continuity, it hurts your confidence in all of these things. In some situations, it's the best product in the space. You rely on it, you're heavily invested in it, and so you've just got to roll with those punches. It's frustrating if we rewind back to that other situation. If that's changed, now you're querying your email, you're trying to figure out, well, who do I call?
And so this is when having a little bit more communication with a vendor and their escalation pathway is so critical, because if you know that SD that's over that sales rep, you can call them up, hey, who's my rep? Why haven't you reached out and talked to me? I got a renewal coming up. I need your guys' support here. Who's now supporting me? And so if you've done done something like an EBC and met some of their leadership, oftentimes you just go through your email, oh, there he is, and then you can get the support that you need.
So I thought you guys were going to cover both, because it doesn't matter where the staff changes. If it changes on the customer side or it changes on the vendor side, you go through some of those same pieces just a little bit.
Absolutely, and,
right?
and if you read
I
the
thought you were going to
question,
cover both.
we have them both on there.
I know
So, but the question was on the vendor side. So then when you think about it from a VAR's perspective, who is typically has a bit more continuity in their relationships with you, especially from a sales engineering side.
So what we're oftentimes doing is we know what's happening in the background, because we probably have other clients that are running into problems with the account reps changing, and so oftentimes we get notifications of that first, can go ahead and reach out to you guys, say, oh, hey, FYI, there's been a shakeup at your favorite vendor, and here's your new rep. Do you want me to reach out and make an introduction? And so that the partner can act as a level of continuity to make sure that that next renewal doesn't, go over and you're then, losing licenses and you got a service that's shut off because you might be a small vendor. And the other part of it is that oftentimes the partner and if you're a small company and you're like, hey, who's my new rep? And you're like sitting somewhere in the commercial pool, like they don't really give you you're not a big deal to them. Like the partner can come in and basically their weight as a partner to that vendor can mean that you get your response back. You know who your rep is, because I as the partner can basically say, like, you guys are putting our relationship in jeopardy here by not getting back to my client or our client.
And I think those are some efficiencies that I've personally experienced, where it's, in these mid-market companies where you're just not quite high on the list enough to be able to have a dedicated sales team or a long-standing engineer, you're then able to build these relationships. And so I very often get the call, I just met with your new sales rep for this product. They're great, they understand, I've briefed them on who you are and what they do. We've set something up in a couple of weeks, we're gonna get together and talk. So that continuity helps me tremendously, especially on some of these more critical vendors.
I'll give you the vendor perspective on that. 'Cause
I don't have time to meet every time.
Absolutely, and if it's much more frequently than a year, I agree with you. So why is that happening? And this is the interesting perspective that I had no idea of, but it really comes down to some very interesting ways of how some of these sales institutions are structured, and maybe some incentives, or maybe the sales cycle that they have to work through. So I guess, how do you see that impacting, or what are those key moments?
Some of the times, like, we all kind of know, like, if your vendor is changing a whole bunch, it usually means there's some internal turmoil at that particular company. Maybe their products aren't landing, so their quotas are all messed up, and so you're getting just this rotating, like, they're not landing in the market, and so the sellers are having a really hard time positioning the product. They're not making their quotas. They're going, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so that can often be a problem. But it can also be a problem on the other side of it, where you have like a rock star rep, met his number, their number every single time. Like, they're doing really great. They're selling all kinds of last year they did a whole bunch of business. They sold a whole bunch of 3-year deals, but they don't have any new 3-year deals this year. They sold them all last year. Their quota is going up. Their quota always goes up. And so at some point, if you're really good at your job as a sales rep, you're forced out of a company because there's no way that you can meet your quota. And you'll get a massive hit on your compensation because your quota goes up and you won't be able to meet it because you don't see it in pipeline. Your forecast is messed up. You can't meet your number. And the only thing that you can do is start over somewhere else.
So be selective. Don't get caught up with the rock star sales reps, because chances are they're going to move on.
Well, I'll say the other thing is, so I haven't been in part of those changes, right? Where let's say I'm coming in and taking accounts, right? My key thing is to understand. Okay, well, I didn't sell this, but I need to understand why it was sold. What are your goals, objectives, and make sure that we're still continuing on that. So if you do have that happen, one thing that might be good for you is to go and talk with your vendor and be like, hey, by the way, I get it, we've had some changes. They may not even have this documented or spoken to you, but here's why we purchased your product. Here's where we're at in our implementation. Here are our expectations, and So that way everybody's working towards the same alignment and goals.
Yep.
What I've noticed is when they do that, they often also change the license model.
Oh, absolutely. And another reason,
It's a completely new world.
and I think you can read into that a little bit, right? So we're talking a little about sales teams changes and all of those things, but when you talk about a line item on there around renewals, right? So there's an interesting way of looking at renewals. From the CISO perspective, I think a renewal is kind of the easy stamp for me. Like I've vetted through either peer groups or partners to say, well, they're still investing in the company, the product is still working, I'm still generally happy with how it's working, let's renew, let's kind of do this. From the sales side, not much incentive to process those renewals.
That's the unfortunate thing is that often, like, you get on a call, like you're processing a renewal, you're like, okay, you know, we're interested in this particular product, it's meeting, we've got it fully implemented, it's meeting our particular use case of why we bought it. And then the sales rep is like, hey, have you heard of all this new stuff that we've got? We've got this, and oh, don't you want to add this? And oh man, you really need to try this. There's a reason for that, and that reason is that it all depends on the vendor, but some of the times they're not compensated on renewals. They're only basically hit when someone doesn't renew. But what they are compensated on is you buying more product and expanding your portfolio with them. So if they have a big platform, they want you to expand on that platform, and that's what actually makes them money. That's why they're pushing that so hard.
I think I've personally read into that as those packages change, right? Like if it's an easy button for me to just renew the same thing over and over, or as a package of bundling of things changes, well, it's like, well, now I can get this feature, which is technically net new and actually pull some things.
For instance, the whole Oracle Java situation.
Sure. Yep.
All of a sudden, anyone in your organization touches it,
Yep.
you need to license it for every user in your organization.
Frustrating,
Those
right?
kind of situations.
Yep.
I mean, even me too. I'm like a partner to some of the vendors there. They have beautiful products, but the licensing model just kills. Clients doesn't like their licensing model. Just they're trying to move away from it.
Yeah.
You know, we playing that. Okay, we want to play with the vendor, but at the same time, we've got to be honest with the client.
Yep.
Because at that point, you got to be their voice of confidence, right?
VMware is a big one right now.
Yeah, and you'll see it, like those change and that's a challenge. So
And one thing you were saying, I want to key in on this for you guys, is that you were talking about, so we're coming up to our renewal, and I got to get in contact with that vendor. So if that vendor's not reaching out to you before, and they're only reaching out to you when your renewal hits, you might want to look at a different vendor.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, I'm just saying, maybe it is meeting your needs, then cool, but if not, you probably want somebody that's going to provide value, and they're not just there, hey, I'm only here when the POs come in, like,
Yeah.
that's just not a good way to operate business.
And
I
that kind
see
of shows
that
that they're not invested in your success.
Exactly.
If they're not checking in, going like, hey, is this working for you? Like, because a lot of the time they don't want it to be shelfware, but because they're not compensated unless you buy new things, you know, some of the times like when the renewal comes around, you're like, I never implemented this. Well, you know, from a partner perspective, we're horrified because we're like, no, we helped you with this and we want you to be happy. We want to solve your problem. But the vendor, you know, they might have dropped the ball and it doesn't seem like you're gonna,
They know they got the MRR and they're fine.
Yeah. So they might have already left. They might have just been like, I sold it, I'm through here, I'm out.
People that actually care.
So that was really good, but the next two you can probably do together also. If the budgets are reduced, or they go up, or they're flat.
Yeah.
Because you guys both have to deal with both those on the C-level and the vendor side, right? So how would you do that?
So let's jump into that and let's ask you, Andrew. So just thinking about if you're a CISO, so your red column there, and your budget has been reduced. So what's that first reaction, or what's that first headspace that you're in there?
Be sad.
Be sad, yeah. I think that's typical. Frustrated, like trying to figure out. But what resources do you have, or what do you rely on to kind of restructure, retool, rethink? Like, what are you at?
I'd try to figure out what costs what needs to be cut if that needs to happen, and
Right.
if there's changes that need to be made, like technology or control-wise.
Right.
Hey, partner, help.
So that's good. So now you're from the CISO perspective, and Andy, I'll come back to you. But like, okay, my budget's been reduced. I need to cycle back, look at my roadmap, look at my planning, look at where I am intending to head with all of these things. What's the low-hanging fruit? What's the license that can be adjusted, or what are these things? Do I know all of those answers right out of the gate? I probably know my roadmap and strategy, but what can be adjusted? That needs to go back to the vendors and the partners to help you through it.
So when I look at that and I say that I've got a reduction or I'm flat, I'm going to look at my entire budget, not just my vendors and partners.
Sure.
And I'm going to look at the performers and non-performers within my entire budget. What does that mean? I have partners that I really like and trust, and I want to use them. And I want to keep them. But I may have employees that are just not cutting it. So now I've got a balance between the two. Who do I want to live with, and who do I not want to live with, in order to achieve the same thing I was going to do anyway?
Right. So,
yeah, there's a conversation there with like what's nice to have versus what's I have to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so then it comes down to, at that point, a conversation with every single one of them. What are you going to do to improve? How can you help me as a partner? And they will. They'll find a way, because I've had to do this several times. And the partner always finds a way in which to live within the budget.
Yep.
and I think that's what we'll focus in on here, because we're always going to have the staffing, different presentation on the staffing thing.
At least you're thinking about outside the box, because I may want to expand my partnership and reduce my head count, or vice versa.
Exactly, and that becomes now this resource in this trusted partner. So it's, again, another line item on there of, is the CISO now reducing staff? Can the partner help me through this reduction, make up the difference? Is it more cost effective?
So on the partner side, what we call that is like technology consolidation, where it oftentimes is going to be you're maybe killing point products and then adding, seeing where you can expand your platforms.
Can be costly.
Yeah. And so as a partner, we can oftentimes help with that, because we see the overlap within your organization about, oh, this technology and this technology. This on the platform side, it might not be as good, but it'll cover your use case, and you'll be secure with that, you know, with whatever that use case is.
Excellent. So any other thoughts that we want to explore here? Jesus, what do you think? So when you're thinking of, my budgets are not what they were last year, I have to do this, you have your strategy, you have anything, any thoughts that you've been through with that?
From the CISO and deputy CIO side, it's having that conversation with the vendor.
Yeah.
Being straightforward and being like, hey, this year my budget was reduced by X%. You have a product I like to keep. What can you do for me?
Yeah.
I mean,
So there you go. So you're tapping your resources, you're having your conversation with your vendors, and so this is what we're going to do.
So like when you guys say, my budget's been reduced, that's panic with the vendor. They don't want that. They basically, in their ledger book, said, hey, they're going to renew for this much, and we're expecting this much in their forecast. And when you then come and say like, nope, that's not going to be the reality, their tables change, and then if they say, gave you any discounts or any, all those are going to, unfortunately, probably leave because they're trying to maintain as much of, because they're relying on it for quota reduction or quota fulfillment, or that term. And so just be wary that when you drop license count and drop utilization of a technology, oftentimes per person, per license, per whatever, is unfortunately going to get more expensive.
Add maintenance to that, because maintenance goes up, and then all of a sudden they had the licenses, they purchased it, all that, but all of a sudden this 16 to 20%, 22% maintenance, gets cut out of the budget, so now you don't have the support.
Yep.
The product's still there, but the support's not there anymore.
And that's for the vendor, because the vendor's not going to play, or a partner will play.
Yeah.
You can do to protect them.
And in that particular case, a partner might say, hey, do you want to switch vendors in this particular case and bring in someone net new?
Right. And a partner may actually say, you're getting too tough for me.
Yeah.
The partner may say, I'm going to be honest, this is getting too
Yeah,
tough.
this.
And that's important to say, because if that partner's very keen to what you've been doing, you may have to go back to the finance folks and say, listen, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Here's your risk.
Yes.
Here's our risk, right?
Because it's about managing the expectation for the finance side of stuff.
Sometimes there's like overlap between different services. It could be that one has developed into a
Platform, yeah.
platform where you're actually going to say, okay, well, I no longer need this because I can use this instead.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up, because that is often not insight that you have acquired across your either renewal cycle or your research cycle, where on the other hand, some of the folks on the sales engineering side that are maybe mandated to go through certain trainings or encourage or incentivized to go through those trainings has now learned that this product that you have a heavily investment replaces this one, or can address 90% of this one. So as you have those opportunities, they have some awesome perspective into that to be able to say, you can actually cut this one now. We're not happy about it, but it makes sense and it helps. So that's fantastic.
Do you want to bring up license banding at all?
So let's,
That's the other thing that's good.
yeah, so I mean,
Bob was hitting on it.
yeah, so we're talking about licensing renewal. So explain where you want to go with this.
Yeah, so you know, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I got to reduce my count, which I work with government, so it's happening all the time.
Yep.
Let's call it out. You know, some of the concern can be around license banning. So there are discounts based upon how much you purchase and own, right? And I have had customers where they wanted to reduce, and I'm like, I can do that for you, but you're actually it's going to cost you more to bring it down.
Yes.
So you know, that's where you want to start partnering together and look at, you know, what kind of numbers do you have, and then maybe if you do reduce some stuff down, is there something else that you can utilize within the same environment, right? So,
I like what Dan said, where some of the products cross, and you've got best of breed here and best of breed here, but this other product is not best of breed, but they have the same features. Sometimes you have to let the best of breed product go, and you may not have all the same features or functionality, but it's good enough to get you through that budget.
operational debt is what I call that.
Yeah, there you go.
So a technical debt and then operational debt.
So at the same time,
Write
think
that
about the executive debt, right? So communication is key here, because you may have gotten budget reduction, and these are the consequences. Now you have to go back before you commit to anything. Go back to the people who are telling you you have to reduce and say, here are the consequences. Are we all okay with this?
Yep.
Are we okay with this? Because here's the risk that we're doing here.
And that's our job as the CISO, right? To come in and explain to our
Exactly.
leadership, yes, I understand my budget is cut, but we cannot cut this, or this is going to actually
Here
be
are the consequences,
right.
because your job as a CISO is to be the consultant to the CEO, but also protect the company's data, and he may not understand that, so there's a balance between that. And finally, your integrity is how you protect yourself, because you must maintain your integrity. And when you have signed contracts or signed RFPs that say I have these things, and suddenly it changes, you've got to consider that, because now you may be lying on those contracts.
Yeah,
Yep.
and insurance, right?
Does
You
anybody
might blow your
consider-
cyber insurance, you take a product down.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many
Everybody-
considerations.
We're thinking
Yep.
about just typical IT stuff, but you got to think this is security and protecting the privacy.
Yep.
So now you have to think, all right, here are the risks. I signed this. I cannot budge on making sure that's safe. Right? I signed this.
Yep. So that's great. So thank you, because I think that's a very valuable point of how we communicate and how we do that. So we could actually take that into the next topic, but we only have 4 minutes. So I want to make sure that we address any of hot topics. Was there anything that stood out that we haven't covered? You guys were really quiet over here, so is there anything that piqued your interest that we should cover? So if there's nothing there, yeah,
Maybe I'd like to hear from a partner vendor perspective.
perfect.
Why does it take so long to get a quote?
Oh, okay, quoting, fantastic. And we'll talk about the different levels and different types of quotes. So if I am trying to figure out a strategy or a roadmap or a budget plan, I can go out and I can seek budgeting quotes, right? With the right partner, you can establish a really quick rapport on some of those things. I know exactly the relationships you're talking of, well, I can't really, and let me go push it through this process, and now weeks later you're not really getting anything, and when you finally get it, it's not even a real number that's close to what you're looking at. And so where I personally find success is, again, with that partner, with a relationship where I can kind of query and they can say, look, this is the ballpark that you're looking at, and I can at least budget off of that. But then when it comes to actually figuring out what my company would use, how I would implement it, what services I would need, all of those kind of things, the quoting there becomes real, and I think, again, with the right partner, you get some quick turnarounds. So in what situations are you seeing delays? Like where is it turning into a long cycle?
I see it more here than in Europe, where I used to. I get a feeling that everybody wants a piece of the pie.
Yep.
And that causes delays in getting quotes.
And so I think what you're seeing there is a lot of the process that is built into that sales cycle, maybe some incentive impacts of who you're contacting, the order of when you're contacting them. And so again, backing up to that, where's my trusted or my single avenue that I can consistently go to get that? That's where I find kind of the shortcut there, right? So any thoughts or building on?
Oftentimes the partner has sold this before. They know generally what it's going to cost. And so some of the times it's a little bit less of like a hostage negotiation between you and the vendor about like, well, how much can I get you to pay? Like, how, what is your budget? Maybe they won't even answer those questions and give you a budgetary quoting until they actually know like what your budget is and how, like what, because to them, they basically have like a cost number, and then anything above that is quota attainment, whatever for them. And so, but oftentimes when you're working through a partner, for the most part, they're kind of like, the partner might know what your budget is a little bit more, and so they can immediately like cut out a half a dozen like conversations between you and them, because if the partner knows what your budget is, then there's like, no, we need a different number, we need a different number, like, and work with on the background to make it so that you get a better price, or at least a price that's ballpark in your budget.
Some of that comes down to the sales process for the vendor or maybe between the partner you're working with. The other thing I would mention is let them know you want a budgetary quote. That'll help get it through further.
Yeah.
And remember, that's always going to be a swag, right? Because at least for me, I always want to understand what you're trying to accomplish to make sure that it's going to line up with what your needs are. Right? Because if I give you a number and then you come back and tell me, oh, well, this isn't going to do it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.